The other method that I want to show you today is called the neutralization model or the annihilation model. And you may have encountered this model before. It basically operates under the principle of a positive and a negative kind of cancelling each other out. Now, I'm going to use the CRA approach for this. And usually I would use algebra tiles to show this method. But today I forgot my algebra tiles, so I'm going to use these counters, these different color counters, and it works just as well. But just for today, I'm going to use these counters. So when we talk about the neutralization model, what we're really talking about is starting to introduce addition and subtraction of negative numbers. Now, students don't really need to do this until year 7, but I think that once the students start to build their understanding of integers, there's no reason why you can't sort of start guiding them in that direction, especially if you think that they're ready to go there. I'm going to start by doing something very simple. I'm going to place a question on here, and the question is going to be 6 plus 4 equals 10. So whenever you're introducing a new concept, particularly when it's a little bit more of an abstract concept, something that they're not really used to, you want to start simply. So I'm going to start with a simple question that they are very familiar with. Then I'm going to introduce the concrete tools to help me to solve this problem. So this problem is 6. So I've got 6 counters here. If I add another 4 counters, altogether, I've got 10 counters. Very simple. The students should have no trouble with that. Now, the reason why I get you to do this is because I'm going to introduce you to these guys over here. These are going to be my -1 counters. And these are going to be my +1 counters. So I'm now assigning a color to each of my integers. And I'm going to introduce you to something called a zero-sum pair. This is a very important mathematical concept that basically suggests this. If I have a +1 and I add a -1 to that, then they make 0. They cancel each other out. All right. So it's a very different way of thinking. So we can say 1 subtract 1 equals 0. But when we work with integers, sometimes it's nice to introduce this idea of there's no such thing as a subtraction, but what we're doing in a subtraction is we're just adding a negative. And this is the key to this neutralization model or this annihilation model. All right, so I hope you're following so far. Let's get into it. So I've done 6 plus 4. I've added a positive number to another positive number, and I've gotten another positive number. So 6 plus 4 equals 10. So I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to use a positive and a negative number, or I'm going to use a subtraction. So I'm going to start with another simple one. 7 minus 5 equals 2. Now we know these. These are very simple for students at year 6, or most students at year 6. So this is where I want you to start changing the way you approach this. So rather than saying 7 minus 5, so we can do 7, let's add 7 here, 7. So we can demonstrate or model this by saying 7 subtract 5 equals 2. So that's a takeaway model. But what I want you to start looking at is to start looking at subtracting in terms of the difference model, but with negative numbers. So I'm going to change this to 7 plus -5. And that's still going to give me 2, because watch what's going to happen. If I add, I've started off with +7, so I've got +7 here, and I want to add 5 negatives. So if I look at this in terms of zero-sum pairs and annihilation, what will happen is each one of these will cancel each other out. Okay, so they will go, and we are left with 2. The answer to the adding the negative integer is 2. So this is the kind of thinking that you want to start introducing to students when you start working with integers, because there are a lot of rules that are associated with integers and sometimes they can cause a lot of confusion. Students don't really understand why they're being done. They just know that they've got to follow them, and if they forget them at some point, then they're not going to know how to solve the problems. So that is your 7 plus -5, and we know that that's 2 using the annihilation model. Let's try a more difficult one, shall we? What about -3 plus -4? What is that going to give us? So you know that you start off with 3 negatives. So we know that our blues are our negatives, and we start off with 3 negatives, so -3. Then we add another 4 negatives. So we've got to add another 4 blues. So here we've got plus -4. So just like when we did the 6 plus 4, +6, and then added another +4, we ended up with +10. So 10 positives. Here we've got 7 negatives. So the answer to this is going to be -7. With this representational section, here's what I want you to do with the representational. I want you to start getting them to represent whatever you're modeling on their number line. So get them to draw a number line, and sometimes it's easier to have, when you're dealing with number lines, to have your concrete, representational and abstract horizontally. But here I've got it not horizontally, I've got it vertically. So we can start, we don't have to start our number lines at 0 at all. So I can start, so my first number is -3, I'm going to start at -2. Please don't get the students to do what I'm doing. We need to use a ruler and we need to draw these properly. So -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, 8, etc. Okay, very rough, but the kids will do a better job at this, trust me. So I've started at -3 here, and I have added another -4. Now, when I'm adding a negative, I'm moving 4 places in the negative. Okay, so I'm ending up at -7. So the whole point of this is getting them to view these in different ways. So when you're looking at integers, it's going to be integers on a number line first and foremost, and then you're moving them into using these tiles, algebra tiles or counters, colored counters. The flip ones are really, really good. And then getting them to work with those positives and negatives and how they create their zero-sum pairs.